So I want to thank all those involved in putting it on in this lovely place. I learned what it's like when people come to my place in Vancouver and don't know what's new and what's old. They've done supposedly a lot of remodeling and they don't know what's new and what's old. It all looks very nice. So comfortable. And I want to thank Colleen for inviting me again. And Marilyn and Barry for hosting me so comfortably, giving up their own bedroom, walling off the stairs, coming up from the kitchen. It takes a lot to put on such things. The dependent arising of such an event, right? It arises in dependence upon many causes and conditions. Like this house, might look as if it always was here, but it arose in dependence upon many causes and conditions, so the event arises in dependence upon many causes and conditions, doesn't exist in and of itself. Just so that's like the purpose of my bowing down to and imagining my teacher sitting on this seat. Whatever teaching I have arises in dependence upon many causes and conditions, doesn't exist in and of itself. And if I start imagining that somehow it exists in and of itself, in myself, easy to become proud or something, and then probably I'll make a big mess of how I teach it, get into a lot of trouble, start asking you to sign up some kind of pledge to send me $50 every month, some kind of rescue, engage in a lot of unsuitable activities, elevate myself, get carried away by the fact that I'm wearing a shawl that has no particular significance. It was given to me by the Dalai Lama, but it doesn't have any other significance than that. I have not been able to figure out how he got it, because it has no significance. Somebody gave it to him, and he had no use for it. So he passed it on to me, but he didn't tell me how he got it. It's sort of circulation of gifts, what do you call it?
Regifting.
Regifting, yes. I at first thought it might have come from his participation in a Jewish ceremony. And of course he would have worn it at the time, but then wouldn't have had any use for it in the future. But it turns out that it's from India and of rather special material. So probably some Indian brought it to him thinking he might be cold sometime. But he has his own robes. So then I thought I should wear it every now and then. And as I came in today, somebody said, "Oh, I guess this must be the guy," or something like that. So then I thought, well, it does have a purpose. Yeah. So, the 3 talks over today and tomorrow are based on this book, How to See Yourself as You Really Are. Which is based on teaching that His Holiness gave in 1972, when both he and I were quite young. He's 5 years older than I am. He was born in 1935, I was born in 1940. He gave it in Dharamsala, in India. I was on Fulbright. I was specifically told not to go to Dharamsala, where he was. So of course, within a couple of weeks of my being in India, I went to Dharamsala, where I was forbidden to go. And I stayed for 12 or 13 months. They found out where I was, but at that time everything was done by mail. So I would write back after a month or so and say, "Oh, where should I be?" You know, and we exchanged letters that way over the course of a year, until finally they complained to Washington that I had not reported in properly or something. But soon after I got there, I found that he was lecturing on the medium-length exposition of the stages of the path to enlightenment. And the very last phase in that book is this section on special insight. And so, how to see yourself as you really are is not what the editor that Simon & Schuster hired thought originally the title meant, which he was scared by the title. He said, "I don't want to know what I look like." No, this is how you really are, right? In truth, in reality. And mistaking how we really are, we get into trouble. So it's not a picture. The title is not based on, here's a picture of you in trouble. It's a picture of you in truth. And by mistaking how you are in truth is how you get into trouble. So in fact, it does give you a picture of how you are in trouble by seeing how you are in truth, right? But that's not right what the title is saying. So he said, "Don't title it that way." But we did. He's the editor of Hawking's, his book on time? What's it called?
Short History.
Short History of Time.
Mm-hmm.
What a clever title. Short. No, he never is involved in the titling of the books. But he does massage every sentence. But he doesn't get the last say on what the sentence, how the sentence is. I do. I have the last say. But he's great. And he's done this series of 5 books. And by now he's totally educated in this sort of system. So 98% of it is acceptable. So this is about how we truly are. And it has to do with dependence and mistaking ourselves for being independent, mistaking ourselves for being inherently existent. How many have read the book? Halfway.
Twice.
Being an overachiever.
I always reread before I talk about the book. I always get a lot out of it, fortunately. It'd be terrible if I didn't. So, dependent arising is said to be the Buddha's focal teaching. And it's said to be fully compatible with emptiness. So then right away you know emptiness does not mean nothingness. If emptiness is compatible with dependent arising, there's no way emptiness can mean nothingness. And if dependent arising is compatible with emptiness, then dependent arising has to cancel something. Empty of what? So if emptiness is compatible with dependent arising, emptiness probably cancels independence, inherent existence. And for dependent arising to be significant, it must be standing in opposition to, like, inherent existence. For dependent arising to have great impact, we must be seeing things as if they exist in and of themselves. Even if intellectually we know things don't exist in and of themselves, for dependent arising to have any impact, to have any significance, it must be that we see things as existing in and of themselves. If we didn't see things as existing in and of themselves, dependent arising wouldn't have that much impact. And Buddha's doctrine would be, it would be like, yeah, I already know that. And the doctrine of emptiness would be, yeah, I already understand that. What else do you have to say? Really? It would be, yeah, I've already studied that. I understand it. What's next on the menu? And there might be something else that was worthwhile to look into in Buddhism, but it wouldn't be this. And if this constitutes wisdom, then all right, I've already got it. And sometimes it does seem this way. So dependent arising has to be contrasted with common experience. Not so much with what we intellectually might already understand, but with our common experience, how we're led into emotional trouble. How do things appear to us in the midst of complicated emotions? So we might already understand a great deal about dependent arising, but be unable to apply it to emotional difficulties. What's being said about dependent arising is not entirely new. That this rug was woven, is that the word? Mm-hmm. By someone. Well, that's not entirely new, give me a break. But, I don't know about this rug, it's not that appealing. I have to use a better example. This one, that's a little better. Yeah. Sorry, I insulted your rug. How dare you insult my rug? See? You know, when you desperately want something and will do almost anything to get it, you know, that kind of emotion, how does the object seem? Yeah. Perfect, just right. All the faults of it are obscured. I bought a rug, Tibetan rug, off the floor in someone's house in Lhasa. The woman, actually, I knew her husband. She ran a beer house right in the center of downtown Lhasa. And it was a rug with 12 lotuses on it. And it smelled like hell when I got it home. It smelled like the whole house. It's beautiful. So, you know, the mind of attraction, the mind that's repelled, right? The mind that's repelled, that can't see any virtues in the object, the mind that's attracted, that can't see any disadvantages in the object. You know, that mind, if you look at that mind at that time, how that mind is conceiving, is accepting the appearance of the object. Oh, it's very interesting. The quiche last night was very nice, very rich, very nice. Marilyn made, you know, things from the garden. And you made it, right? You didn't give things from the garden to somebody else to make. A little bit of accusation making. And so this morning, you know, I wanted another piece of that quiche. And she already made, I came down just in time to get the omelet. But I had room for another piece of that quiche. So I got that quiche. Did you have another piece of that quiche? I was hoping that nobody got the rest of that quiche. So I got a piece of that quiche. You know, how did that piece of quiche look to me in my mind, right? So, one meaning of dependent arising is that objects arise in dependence upon causes and conditions. Sometimes it just seems as if the object is there in and of itself. When you think about it at all, obviously it was made by causes and conditions. But does the fact that it's made by causes and conditions challenge how the object appears? That's the question. Does it challenge how it appears, even in sense perception? You follow? See, what's being said here is that our senses are deceived. Our senses, even from the first moment, are deceived. And so, agreeing with how it appears to our senses where the mind then, mental consciousness, is further deceived. It's like, wow. It's like you're locked. Well, what other information do you have other than the appearance of the object? And then you're agreeing. You're just accepting. You're not thinking about it, you're just accepting. It's like a dream, right? The object appears, you're just going along with it. That's all. You're getting on a bus, right? And you just accept you're getting on a bus. So what other information can you bring to it? You see, it's this challenge. Doesn't make any sense that, I put my head down in 150 mile and I'm getting on a bus, big bus. So the exploration of the conflict between how things exist and how they appear and how they exist. So another meaning of dependent arising is, this first meaning of dependent arising is that the effect arises in dependence upon the causes. We can't see the causes. We can't see the person. We don't see the person, right? Have you ever seen somebody making these rugs? Put in some wool, to pound it. Cut it afterwards. So arise means produce. Then another meaning of dependent arising takes arise differently and just takes it as meaning exist or established in dependence upon its parts. So the rug exists in dependence upon the parts of the rug, which are these, hundreds of thousands or millions of hairs, or this half and that half. And the hour arises in dependence upon minutes. This then gets into like childhood questions you asked and children ask, how many parts can you take away from a Mercedes and it'll still be a Mercedes? Kids ask so many of these questions, and after a while you just say, shut up. And Nagarjuna has 27 chapters of these types of questions. TRV Murti, I sat in on a course of his at Harvard in 1960 something, too. 63, spring semester. Said Nagarjuna examines things this way, ad nauseam, to the brink of nausea, or through nausea, or beyond nausea. But actually, not nausea at all. I mean, if you have a playful mind, it's really marvelous. It loosens you up. You know, this house, you know, you feel this marvelous house. And you start looking for the house. You know, how many rooms does this house have? 1, 2, 3, 4 downstairs, 5 upstairs,
3 bedrooms,
8, 9, 10. There's a lot of meditations done this way. You know, you two have been taking care of this house, and then you start searching for the house. Is the house with 10 rooms this room that we're in? Do you think this could become exciting? You could sort of think, let me out of here. This is why I came so far for. You have this guy talk about this, wearing this robe from the Dalai Lama that doesn't mean anything. This room isn't the house with 10 rooms. That room over there isn't the house with 10 rooms. The kitchen isn't the house with 10 rooms. Or is it? The TV room isn't the house with 10 rooms. The sunroom isn't the house with 10 rooms. Your bedroom isn't the house with 10 rooms. That bedroom isn't the house with 10 rooms. After a while you start thinking, damn it, it is. Or is it? That one up there isn't the house with 10 rooms. Wherever you look, this one, this. So anyway, the house exists in dependence upon these rooms. A little disturbing. Where's this house that exists in dependence upon the 10 rooms? Is the house separate from, it exists in dependence upon the 10 rooms. Kind of sounds kind of good. But even when you say it, it's like, where's that house that exists in dependence upon the 10 rooms? Dependent arising. He's going out to find the house.
What's the bathroom?
Yeah. We won't worry too much about it. We'll give you an hour. So, second meaning of dependent arising is arising or existing or being established in dependence upon its parts. And when you think about it, everything is subject to this analysis. So the way this book is written, there are encapsulations of the important points of the teaching as you go along. And then at the end is an appendix that contains all of those encapsulations. And you might take a look at these in between sessions. Page 237, and there's, enough of you have copies so that those of you who don't have copies could, steal other people's copies when they're not looking. And so forth. And think of something like, you all came in a car. You didn't take a bus. The car you came in, it's not unthinkable that a tractor drove out here today and smashed up your car, right? You were expecting a bulldozer, and it came and flattened somebody's car out there, all right? And you think, where's your car? Would you mind pointing to your car? Could you point, please? Let's see. The car I came in is over there, yes. Where's, your car? I noticed it. Would you point to your car, please? Oh, okay. And you didn't come in a car? Oh, okay.
You came in my car.
Yeah, well, that's all right. 1 point is not sufficient. Everyone has to point. Now, kind of look at what you were pointing at, okay? What's at the end of your finger? And I don't mean the point of your fingernail. What are you pointing at? There's some car, right? There's something over there. Now that thing about which you have some concern, because I've got to get to the airport tomorrow, right? And it was just flat. Maybe it was flat. Now, I'm not asking a technical question. I'm asking a question of just what appeared to your mind. I'm not asking a philosophical question. I'm not asking a reflective, kind of philosophically reflective. See, I can't even say it because I'm tuned into, sort of emotion, right? What else would you call it? Well, attachment, I don't know. I don't want to put a pejorative on it. It just means ordinary life, right? What else? Flow of just how things are. Ordinary living. Where's the kitchen? Right? I want lunch. Where's the bank? Shit, I don't know. I don't even know where Vancouver is anymore. There?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I know where my money is. car is still over there, right?
Hope so.
Are you sure it wasn't flattened? I'm gonna have to take a look. You know, that one really. I'm gonna get to the airport, and my car's gonna be flattened. My 1991 Subaru. What are you pointing at? Just kind of get that image. You know, say the Eiffel Tower. Just the ordinary. Is there some needle building in Toronto?
Mhm.
Does it got a restaurant up top? Does it have a restaurant? Revolving restaurant? What's it called?
CN Tower,
CN?
Canadian
Well,
National.
National Railway Tower.
CN Tower. We all know where it is, except me. I'm a new Canadian. Somebody said, "You're not a Canadian. You're just a permanent resident." Then she said, "Well, but you can do everything a citizen can do." I said, "Well, let me be a Canadian." Your car. Yeah. It's, you see, this ability to be able to tune into ordinary experience, to not flip into the sort of reflective, philosophical, I've studied this, I've studied that mode. To be able to see how I'm seeing it at that moment. And it can be, you know, if you're angry or something, it can be really ugly. You know, even yourself can look really awful. Or the other person can look, you know, really atrocious. It can be embarrassing. But it's so embarrassing that you don't want to see it. But the ability to tune into this and to watch it and stay with it and not interfere with it and just let it be, watch it, see what it looks like, stay there. Why not? I mean, because when you get angry, it just stays there, right? And here, you're developing an ability to just to let it stay there and watch it without interfering with it, without wiping it out. Sometimes people will wipe out these things and think, "Oh, that's emptiness," or "Oh, I've realized it's empty." That's ridiculous. It just your embarrassment caused it to disappear, right? Or your watchfulness was too strong and it disappeared. Follow me? Watchfulness was too strong and it disappeared. Because usually the watchfulness, you know, isn't quite like what we're doing, so this is a little bit new. So the watchfulness has to be, what, a little bit, I don't know, non-interfering, or I don't want to call it subtle, but it is something a little quiet, or what would you call it? Non-interfering. smooth, gentle. But still, that thing you're watching is carrying on, going on. Here with the car, we have a somewhat neutral situation. A little bit of concern. We know we're playing, so it's not too serious, but still you know where your car is. I know where this one. I was looking at it this morning. Ah, they moved the car. It wasn't there last night. I wonder when they moved it. They didn't want me to steal it last night, but I noticed it. Can you leave the keys in overnight here?
Yes.
You can.
Can.
Ah, foolish you. But I probably couldn't find my way out. That's a real skill, and it's the fulcrum, maybe, of meditation. In meditation, you need analytical ability, but the analytical ability won't work if you don't have this other skill to see how things appear in the ordinary state. Because the analytical ability doesn't have anything to work on. It'll just convince you that you know what you're talking about. You know, by now I then would be thoroughly convinced that I know what I'm talking about, right? It's only in relation to its having an applicability that you see, oh, So, that it arises, exists, in dependence upon parts, does that conflict? Maybe the conflict is too strong. Does that challenge the way it appears? This is so nice that I'm trying to figure out how I can bundle it up, because I can probably, on my airplane ticket, take it home. I just have to somehow make it so you don't notice. And if I wrap it, the other side, does it conflict? Does it challenge the way it appears? The fact that it depends upon parts. So you see, I'm already jumping. I'm asking you to notice how something appears, but then I'm already jumping to the second phase of doing something analytical. And I'm asking you, does the fact that it depends upon its parts challenge the way it appears? Whereas if I was more skilled at teaching, I would leave you only with the first step. But I'm not skilled at teaching, so I'm giving you the second step and confusing you right away. Drinking coffee, I'm kind of compelled to go on to the second step. So, in other words, I'm calling your attention to the fact that you read a book, you have to slow down and do steps one by one. Do this first step. Do it. Might take a week, might take 2 weeks, might take a month, might take an hour, might take only a few minutes, okay? And then this second step of, one meaning of dependent arising is, it arises in dependence upon its parts. Arise here doesn't mean produce, it means exist. Does the fact that it exists in dependence upon its parts challenge the way it appears? Does it? It's a second step, and it's a completely different type of mind. Okay? It's a completely different type of yoga. This is yoga. First one is one type of yoga, second is another type of yoga. Now, having said that, sometimes people say, well, first you got to do this, and then you got to do that, and then you do this third step. And sometimes you do the various steps. When you do some of the later steps, the first step begins making sense. And when you come back to it later, then you can really do the first step. Okay? So now I'm really confusing you. I've said, look, spend a week, a month, a year doing the first step. And then I said, well, maybe you want to do a whole lot of the steps and come back and you'll find that when you do the first step a year from now, because you've done these other steps, the first step will make a lot more sense to you. Like a lot of people, even in the text it'll say, you've got to bow down first, and then you can receive all these other teachings. Well, as even the Dalai Lama says, that's not necessarily the case. You receive these other teachings, you think about them and so forth, they make a lot of sense, then you may feel to bow down. It works quite a different way. So these teachings are like, they work laterally, I guess. He doesn't say it quite that way, right? But in the book, now I'm advertising another book. The book after this one was the title we started out with was How to Become Enlightened. We changed it to Becoming Enlightened. Yeah, Becoming Enlightened. Makes it very clear that it's like lateral. This step helping with that one, that step helping with this one, and even though we lay it out this way and say you've got to do it in this order, that's not the way it works. That's very, very true. Yeah. But indeed, spend some time. You've got to learn. In order to do that, you've got to learn all the steps. For them to work laterally, you have to learn all the steps. Where was your car? Please point. I think it moved. No, it didn't. There was one called Rolling Back. That's a good one, really, because that could happen, right? studying once with Geshe Rapten. And we used to study way up on the hill in Dharamsala. In his mud. It's really, I don't know what the building was made of, but it looked as if it was made of mud. But anyway, it had one pillar in the middle. And meditators used to come down to his place, even though it was way up in Dharamsala. Meditators come down to ask him questions, often in the midst of our sessions. And we're studying, actually, something I brought, if you want to look in more to this, the fifth Dalai Lama's exposition of the steps about meditating on emptiness are at the beginning of this book, up through page, it's called Tantric Techniques, up through page 43, this first chapter of this book. He was teaching me the fifth Dalai Lama's section on special insight, and the fifth Dalai Lama's text is quoted here, and I spend considerable time explaining it. And if I was cleverer, I would have prearranged talking about Geshe Rapten. I just happened to be, and happened to think of it. But I prearranged bringing the book, obviously, for that reason. Because some of the meditations in this are explained quite clearly also in that text. That's why I brought it. And he had come down to the area of the library. I lived somewhat close to him up in Upper Dharamsala. And he had come down to the library for a teaching by the junior tutor of the Dalai Lama, and was staying in the home of the director of the library. And everything was very poor in Dharamsala at the time, and the home of the director, although it was new, it was just a cement home, had no screens on the windows. And there were cows just outside the window belonging to an Indian family. And the room where he was teaching me was full of flies. And there were flies crawling all over us, all over him and all over me, especially our faces. And he was teaching about identifying your sense of I, self, like a car, you know, and getting a hold of it, getting a sense of I. And we were both, I could tell, watching the flies crawling on each other's face, because we weren't going like this, because we'd have to always be doing this. So we just sort of let them crawl, which was a bit, I don't know, uncomfortable. But that's how it was. And as he was teaching, you know, you couldn't help but, you know, we were sitting this close. And he was saying, well, you know, there might be a loud noise nearby. And you know what it's like when there's loud noise. There's some sense of, right? And there'll be an opportunity in which you can catch your sense of, right? You see, usually the attention goes there, but there's also something, you know, there's an apprehension here, apprehensiveness. And so it will be an opportunity to catch, not let the attention just go there, but to catch here. And so, of course, shortly after that, something fell down on the sort of little porch area just outside the room where he was teaching me. Bang! And neither of us flinched. It was very funny. But what we did have, really, was this sense of the self that was watching the flies, walking over the face of the other person. And the sense of the self watching the other person, and yet mainly paying attention to the teaching. That's very interesting. So there are, you see, the sense of objects inherently existing occurs at all times because our senses are infected with that. But it takes something a little bit more dramatic for us in the state we're in to get a clearer sense of it. So such instances as when you get up at night and you're walking in the dark and you stumble against something, right? And there's a coalescing inside. And you could stay with that. Oh, what's that? What's that like? Yeah. We're pausing for a tape change. What were we saying? So, because the sense of the inherent existence of the object infects every moment is available for getting a sense of what inherent existence is. But given that we're so used to it, what's needed is a more dramatic incident. So various situations are suggested, like somebody, praising you, telling you what a marvelous job you've done, and you're feeling so happy. And maybe they give you a piece of candy or something like that, and somebody gives you a piece of candy, especially if it's chocolate, especially really good chocolate, really dark chocolate, something above 70%. Then it's like, so, right, something. And, or somebody accuses you, right? Oh, how could you make such a horrible quiche? That kind of thing. Where did you find those ingredients? Even when it's false, you have some feeling of, but you said it was so good. Something.
Take it back.
And this experienced in so many different ways, right? So, but in something that's quite neutral, but isn't neutral, like where's your car? Really great, really great. His Holiness says here, it's good to start with yourself because yourself is at the center of the mess. And the texts also say this. But the texts also say, they say, start with the self, and then they say, like a chariot. That means like a car. And then like a car means, use the example of a car. Using the example of a car means it's easier with a car than it is with yourself. Which means start with a car. Something a little bit neutral. So you can get some idea of how the procedure goes, and then apply the procedure to yourself. And again, this is not like you have to do it this way, and because kind of bouncing back and forth from house or car to self to something else, though the one will enrich the other. But doing something a bit neutral, which a car isn't, but a bit neutral, right? It's a bad pun. I hope you left it in park. There was a really weird car in front of me going to the airport yesterday. And I thought, oh, am I going to crash trying to get a look at that car? And I'm thinking all these kind of Buddhist things, and I shouldn't be attached to just want to take a look at that weird car. But I just kept watching. I could hardly, it was two cars in front of me. It was a really weird looking car. And I finally got up by the side of it to take a look at it. Yeah, it's just a weird looking car. So Chandrakirti, for instance, uses the chariot, the car, as the example, so that you can get used to the procedure. And you have to say it's not with a sense that you could fully realize the emptiness of inherent existence of the car, but you can get used to the procedure. And probably why you couldn't realize fully the absence of inherent existence of the car is that there's such a mess associated with the self that would prevent realizing the emptiness of inherent existence of anything else. Because Aryadeva says, if you realize, and Buddha also, if you realize the emptiness of one thing, you can realize the emptiness of any other thing. So that means if you have such horrible problems with one thing, you're not going to be able to realize the emptiness of any other thing. I'm turning that on its head. If you have such horrible problems with one thing, you're not going to be able to realize the emptiness of any other thing. That's really very helpful. And so, His Holiness, when he begins that chapter, says, yourself is at the center of all of the mess. And therefore, he says it's easier to realize the emptiness of the self. So I was thinking about this the other day. Well, easier, yes, because you couldn't realize the emptiness of anything else until you realize the emptiness of it. So really not you know, you see, there is a statement that it's easier to realize. There's a lot of thought on this topic. Which is not to say you have to get rid of all of your problems, right? One by one, all the attachments and all of the hatreds and so forth. Do you follow? Because there's something, some basic thing underpinning all of these problems, and that's this basic ignorance. So when you start shaking up this basic ignorance, you're shaking up all of these problems, which does make for some difficulties, because your personality is then, which is set up around all of these problems, is getting shaken up. So then that's why there's this plethora of practices for impermanence, love, compassion, right? Otherwise, I think it could be that you start shaking up ignorance, you could get quite hateful, stirred up, get quite overly attached even, you know? So there's a lot of sense to a great many of these practices you find in the stages of the path teaching, like learning how to take joy in other person's prosperity. Just even hearing about the practice of taking joy, even just hearing, you know, wow, taking joy that some other people are younger, handsomer, more beautiful, and richer, and, you know? So if you look through all those, those other practices begin making, you know, a lot of sense. Practice of disclosing ill deeds, of feeling, oh, I'm really sorry I did such and such. I'm not going to do any more of that. Oh, we're getting into a lot of things. I never know where these things are going to, you know, how it starts. I never know how it's going to start. Once it starts, then it just goes. One thing after another. So, questions? We have 5 minutes.
I was wondering about when you get that sudden sense of, and you recognize that it's an attachment to the self, it's the I. How do you negate that? Like, is it just practice and practice and practice?
I think, you know, there are these steps in here. One important thing is to notice it, see what it looks like, and stay with that. And think, does this kind of appearance occur to me in other circumstances? Negating it means to undermine the consciousness that believes in it. Undermining the consciousness that believes in it is to use various types of reasonings. One of the reasonings is dependent arising. And the book lays out these reasonings, and we'll go into them. Some of the reasonings I think will seem sensible to you and others won't. And I think it's helpful to react to them and think, oh, this is senseless, this is sensible. This one strikes me as maybe okay, and this one is just totally silly, you know? Because it's got to, even though, let's see, we're talking about mind that, a type of yoga where you're watching how the mind ordinarily works. Then you're talking about an analytical mind. Now this analytical mind is going to have to work on that one. For it to work on it, these two are going to have to come together. So this one's going to have to make sense. It can't be just superimposed. You know, like blah blah blah, go away. Oh, it's not produced from self, other, both, and neither. Go away. You know, it has to make sense. So it has to come down to really being felt. So the analytical is going to have to come down to, like this one, being felt. And then it's going to have tremendous impact on this level. It's going to have to be disturbing. And if we make some progress here, it's going to have to be on exploring those reasonings and you know, facing, you know, this looks like garbage. This looks like you're just setting up some straw person and lighting a match and it's not working. Yes.
It's been said, life is like an illusion, right?
Like an illusion.
Like an illusion. Now, if dependent arising equals emptiness, and emptiness equals dependent arising, how do we know it's not another illusion or delusion?
That's okay. It's 11:29. Let's leave that for later. I need lunch. So, like an illusion, lunch could be like an illusion and still fill the stomach. But an illusion couldn't fill the stomach, right? Like an illusion could, but an illusion couldn't. But that doesn't answer his question, right?
No, we have lunch.
His question is dependent arising going to be just an illusion, or is it going to be like an illusion, right? So I won't pretend I've answered it. Okay. So we're resuming at... So it's good to dedicate the whatever little merit there is in a session to the welfare of as many beings as you can possibly imagine.